Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies played a weird game against the New York Knicks on Tuesday night. And of course, we are about 24 hours away from the trade deadline. So on this episode, I'm going to talk about that game against the Knicks and also look at some more trade stuff before I get there. Just a reminder, if you want to join my Slack channel, the Grits and Grinds Slack channel, the Fast Break Breakfast Slack channel, you can do all of that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. You also get access to exclusive bonus content, including bonus episodes over at Patreon. So if you want to support the creation of this show and also get that bonus stuff, go to patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right, let's start with what I'm going to call a wild game against the New York Knicks. I don't think we expected much coming into the game. We were not as shorthanded as we were against the Celtics. Jaren Jackson Jr. did not play in this game. Neither did Xavier Tillman. But somewhat surprisingly to me, a lot of the questionable guys ended up playing. Vince Williams Jr. played. John Conchar played. Derrick Rose played. And because of that, I was like, hey, maybe we have a fighting chance. And then, early on, it was like, no, this is the same thing we saw against the Celtics on Sunday. We're just getting obliterated. We're not able to guard the rim. We're not able to stop the Knicks in transition. We are struggling to score. Like, the Grizzlies didn't score for the first 3 to 4 minutes of the second quarter. They found themselves down 24 at halftime. They gave up 70 points in the first half, just like they did against the Celtics on Sunday. And it feels like we're in for another just listless, humiliating blowout. But somehow the Grizzlies had a wild fourth quarter. They put together an 18-1 run at one point. They made 9 fourth quarter three-pointers, and eventually they cut it to 4 with like 2 minutes to go. Then Dante DiVincenzo, who had a massive game, hit a shot to put the Knicks up 7, and that was basically the end of the fun. But it was exhilarating in a way. It was wholly unexpected. And we got to see, I guess, some fun stuff down the stretch there from like Jacob Gilyard doing stuff, G.G. Jackson having a big fourth quarter. David Roddy was part of that big fourth quarter. But regardless, the Grizzlies lose kind of as expected. One of the things that was weird about this game was just that the Grizzlies were making all their threes. And when they were getting destroyed, they were still making their three-pointers. They were down, 28 with like a minute to go in the third quarter. And at that point, they'd made 12 out of 23 three-pointers. And do you know how hard it is to be down by 28 points when you've made 12 out of 23 three-pointers? It's remarkable. But eventually, I don't know, they actually got a few stops. Maybe the Knicks took their foot off the gas pedal, and you saw this quick, 12-0 run. It all started with a David Roddy 3, and then G.G. Jackson hit a top of the key three-pointer for a quick, back-to-back made threes to cut into that lead. Then Gigi made consecutive great defensive plays. I think he had 2 straight steals. You had Gilyard hitting back-to-back threes. He ended up making 3 in a row, Gilyard did, and that was all part of this, like, the team making 6 straight three-pointers. That was that 18-1 run. For the Knicks, unfortunately, Jalen Brunson then rolls his ankle, and this is a team that was shorthanded. I mean, not Grizzlies shorthanded, but they were already missing, Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson and OG Anunoby, and losing Brunson, that's something to monitor going forward for the Knicks, of course. You hate to see that. But after they lost Brunson, it was kind of like, oh, this team might be sort of on the ropes. You had this big play by Trey Jemison. Trey Jemison with like a career game, had 12 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 assists. He had this incredible block shot and then finished it up on the other end with a putback dunk, all part of that great run for the Grizzlies. So the Grizzlies ended up scoring 39 points in the fourth quarter. The 21 made threes, that's the second most threes they've had in a game this season. That's just the 11th time in franchise history where they've made 20 or more threes in a game. They're 8-3 in those games. The Grizzlies shot a season high 57% from three in this game. They racked up 33 assists. That ties the Grizzlies' season high for assists in a game. I mean, with that many three-pointers going in, it's going to boost those assist numbers, but still, this has been, I think, a positive trend, even in all the badness for the Grizzlies, that their assist numbers have been generally high. The last 20 games are averaging about 27 assists per game. That's way up from like the first 30 games of the year. First 30 games of the year, they were only getting 24 assists per game. I think a lot of that is tied to some three-point shooting variance. The Grizzlies have been making three-pointers. Since January 1st, the Grizzlies are third in the NBA in made threes per game, averaging just about 15 made three-pointers per game. They only trail the Celtics and the Cavaliers over that time frame. They're making 37% of their threes in that time frame, which is pretty good. I mean, the bad part is they're still awful at offense. They have a terrible offensive rating, even with making all those three-pointers. Part of that three-point barrage helped out by Luke Kennard. Luke made 3 three-pointers in this one. He has hit 2 or more threes in 12 straight games. Vince Williams Jr. made 3 out of 5 threes. Vince had another kind of erratic to bad game. He did a lot of his damage in the first half. I mean, he was playing well. I thought he played really, really well in the first half. Second half, he's committing these turnovers. He's missing a lot of shots. He, of course, is being asked to do a ton, and I think we're seeing some of the limitations of his game, but he made 3 out of 5 threes. Santi Aldama made 3 out of 5 threes. Gilliard, of course, with those 3 in a row threes in the fourth, he ended up with 4 made threes total. He has been on fire from the three-point line. Last 4 games, he's making 56% of his threes, making over 3 per game. So that's been good to see. Gigi Jackson. Let's talk about Gigi Jackson just briefly before we get into some trade deadline stuff. Gigi had been struggling a lot from the field. And even in this one, he did most of his damage in the second half. And I was just curious about these splits between first half and second half. And they are, let me tell you, stark over the last 5 games. In the last 5 games, in the first half, Gigi Jackson is only making 19% of his field goal attempts. He leads the team in three-pointers attempted in first halves over the last 5 games with 19. He's only made 3 of them. But then in the second half, Gigi's doing more of his damage. Like he had a big fourth quarter in this one. And also, it's not just the three-point shooting where Gigi is doing the damage. I think we keep seeing the positives of him driving towards the basket. He looks the most impressive to me when he's finishing in the paint, when he's driving in the paint, and you're seeing his athleticism and size. Him finishing above the rim on driving layups in traffic. And then, of course, the defensive plays, the blocked shots and the steals. That is what we love. Maybe, again, repeating myself from a previous episode, fewer three-pointers when you're standing 2 steps behind the line. But in the second halves of his last 5 games, he's making 41% of his field goal attempts, 35% from 3 in the second halves of the last 5 games. Not good, but acceptable. A lot better. And would you like to point out, what's the difference between first halves and second halves? You could correctly say garbage time. We've been playing a lot of garbage time. Now, this game was garbage time and then became not garbage time as the Grizzlies got it within single digits and, of course, cut it to 4. But Gigi's erratic play, it's been a roller coaster a bit. I mean, he was okay in the first half, didn't do a lot, but also didn't miss a lot of shots. I thought he played within himself, which was good to see. In the first half, you had Derrick Rose playing, Luke Kennard, he was on lineups with those guys, and he did, I think, a better job of deferring. By the way, Derrick Rose got hurt in this game. Left the game with an ankle injury. Did not play in the second half. I mean, I would say it's bad luck, but it's not luck. It's just something else. It's just unfortunate. Derrick plays. Derrick gets hurt. He had 7 points, 2 assists, 1 steal in the first half. The Derrick Rose signing remains a quizzical head scratcher. I was shocked when it happened. My initial analysis was this is an awful signing, a terrible use of resources. There hasn't been a moment in the past, 6-7 months, however long it's been, where I thought it was a good signing. I mean, there's all this. He's here to help the locker room. How do we measure that? The team's bad. There's some murmurs. Ja Morant wanted him. Okay. But what if we didn't get him? What is Ja going to do? I mean, Ja's on a max salary and he's not playing. Is Derrick here to babysit Ja? Again, all right, Ja's not gotten in any additional trouble, but Ja's played in 9 games. The Derrick Rose thing has gone very poorly. The team is losing and is always shorthanded, and it's in no small part that with the one roster spot in the offseason, they filled it with Derrick Rose. But I guess none of that really matters that much. No reason to go on a Derrick Rose rant. Get better, Derrick, just because I don't like seeing people get hurt. Seems bad. Again, Trey Jemison, I highlighted, had a very, very strong game, being a force in the interior. And Conchar, in his minutes, racked up a very Conchar line, 5 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. Tosan Uwoma played, had 4 points, 2 assists, and a rebound in about 20 minutes. Again, they're playing 10 deep, which you don't have to if you don't want to. But I guess it makes sense. This one was sort of out of control for a while. Again, until it wasn't. Oh, also Santi. Santi, 11 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. Santi's been making threes of late. That part has been good to see. But let's talk now about the trade deadline. And, of course, on the last episode, I was highlighting some things that I thought maybe could occur or should occur. I pulled out some really weird, maybe obscure names. I don't know what's going to happen for the Grizzlies. I don't think they're going to be maybe super proactive. Well, like I was saying on the last episode, you might want to call and see what the asking price is for Gogo Batadze or Jalen Smith. But I think a lot of what the Grizzlies are going to do is kind of wait around and see what happens, what other teams do, and then try to capitalize on that by either taking back a player who you think might help next year. I do feel kind of more strongly than I did, a couple days ago. The more I think about it, I do want the Victor Oladipo contract to be turned into a contract that goes into next season. I know we're cutting salary, and you have to walk this tight line or tightrope between, all right, we gotta stay out of the luxury tax, but also I want to have a player. I want to have that salary slot, and I think, it would help the Grizzlies to have somebody signed for next year. Maybe they don't feel that way. Maybe they feel, all right, if we can have the expiring Oladipo money, that gives us more wiggle room where we can use our MLE next year, and then we could sign a free agent that way. I mean, possibly. Of course, I have my own doubts the Grizzlies will use their MLE, just like they didn't last year when they chose to sign Derrick Rose, and they didn't use it the year before either. So part of me thinks I would prefer them to trade Victor Oladipo for somebody who's making just any amount of money. And that's where we get the names like Nasir Little. Another name we could consider is Cody Martin from the Hornets. Cody has had pretty big injury issues all season, and he's a guy in the offseason I thought should be a target with the Grizzlies MLE. Maybe you think Cody Martin being signed into next year. This is why I like the idea of a Kevon Looney trade, maybe Tillman for Looney. That doesn't use the Oladipo contract, but that at least gives you that open roster spot, which you need. If you send out Tillman, then you could just waive Oladipo. That accomplishes the goal of opening up a roster spot for this year for Gigi Jackson. But then you do bring in a player for next season. Also, speaking of the Hornets, I didn't mention last episode, and maybe I could have, Nick Richards as a target for the Grizzlies. I think Nick Richards makes a lot of sense for the Grizzlies. The Hornets probably in full sell mode where they're just trying to get anything for the guys they have. is Nick Richards, who signed for $5 million next year, who has a non-guaranteed salary in 2025, the 2025-2026 season. Is he good enough for like 2 second-round picks? Would the Hornets accept 2 second-round picks for him? I mean, maybe. He's a very just modest to okay center, and I think he shores up your front court a little bit. And so I wouldn't mind having, Nick Richards in the fold. Also, this could include a guy like Quentin Grimes, who of course has been linked to the Grizzlies in reports previously. Quentin Grimes signed beyond this season. That would help you. I think just having a player signed for next year, as long as you can free up another roster spot, as in trading away Tillman for some second-round picks, trading away Conchar maybe to the Celtics who are looking for roster depth. If you can free up another roster spot, then I think bringing in someone signed into next year would be something I would be seriously looking at. And then, of course, if you traded for like a Quentin Grimes, that frees you up to trade Luke Kennard. And I still think maybe for the Grizzlies, the most interesting part of the trade deadline is what do they do with Luke Kennard? If you don't trade him, that in my mind signals you're going to bring him back. You're going to exercise that team option. Or if you don't exercise that team option, you're going to work out some kind of extension where maybe you can bring him back for less than that $15 million he would be owed. If you picked up the team option, you could sign him to like 3 years, $10 million, and maybe that would be worth it to him. Although, essentially that would be a 2-year, $15 million extension, which is pretty cheap. I don't know if Luke would be okay with that. So maybe it'd be something like 3 years, $36 million, 3 years, $38 million, something like that. And then maybe you get like some kind of tradable deal. As far as like bigger name things or bigger moves that you could make, I still think we should be monitoring whatever the Nets do. A lot of the reporting about the Nets is they want to be more so buyers than sellers. They do not control their own draft pick this year. I, of course, have an obsession with Cam Johnson. That's extremely unlikely, but I think something that could be more likely is if they make a move, if they do a very aggressive move where they go for a DeJounte Murray, where in that situation, you want to be monitoring, hey, what happens to Royce O'Neal? What happens to Dorian Finney-Smith? There's always been chatter about the Grizzlies' interest in Dorian Finney-Smith. I mean, Jake Fisher mentioned it recently, how last year when the Grizzlies ended up doing the Marcus Smart deal, they were also considering making a trade for Dorian Finney-Smith. So if there is a bigger move with the Nets and you could get Dorian Finney-Smith for several second-round picks, or even I would consider, I don't know if the Nets would do it, would you trade your 2025 draft pick for just Dorian Finney-Smith? Again, I use the adjective modest, maybe too much. He's an okay player. He's an average guy who can play small forward, can also play some power forward. He fits well on the team. That's something I like about him. He fits great alongside Ja and Desmond and Jaren, and even alongside Marcus. If you want to consider lineups that have Ja, Des, Marcus, and Jaren, Dorian Finney-Smith is a very nice fifth member of a potential lineup like that. What's that worth to you? I don't know if it's worth spending a first-round pick. I think the more likely option is you just wait until next year. You don't do anything that aggressive this season. But, if the price is those 3 second-round picks you picked up for trading Steven Adams, I think that's something you would probably, have to consider. Also, there are so many, as you go through the list of players in the NBA who fit in these trade exceptions, like the Steven Adams trade exception that was just generated, we're in no rush to use it, but there's a lot of players that you could bring back in that. There's, of course, a ton of players who you could just match their salary straight up for Victor Oladipo. You look at guys who aren't going to get re-signed next year. I mean, I know the Grizzlies wouldn't bring back Kyle Anderson, but that's a type of player who has an expiring salary, and the Timberwolves probably can't sign him next year. There's a lot of those guys in the NBA that, maybe the Grizzlies could bring back if, in fact, they decide to not just eat the Oladipo salary. And again, there's some talk of the Killian Hayes thing, which was reported on Monday. There's some talk of all right, we're bringing in Killian Hayes just to clear salary cap space for next season. That isn't a thing. We're not getting under the salary cap. It doesn't really help us to, trading Oladipo for Killian Hayes doesn't save us any money for next year if you're not bringing either, either player back. They're both expiring salaries. So that Killian Hayes thing was somewhat, to see if Killian Hayes can help your basketball team into the future, and maybe thinking that like you could re-sign him for not very much to be like a backup point guard or something. I, again, find that kind of weird. It seems unlikely that'll happen, but, maybe there is something I'm missing about that deal. Also, like thinking of bigger deals, these are unlikely names, but players that like, maybe if it's more likely if you're playing 2K, but like guys who are undervalued who could be available. Like one of them is Rui Hachimura. What are the Lakers doing? Are they going to make a big deal for DeJounte Murray? Are they going to make a big deal for somebody else? Are they just trying to get rid of Rui's contract? That's kind of weird, but like I don't hate Rui Hachimura. I feel like his deal in the future could be movable. Of course, Rui cooked us in the playoffs last year, so maybe I have a slightly elevated opinion of him over what he actually is as an NBA player. Also, a guy like Bobby Portis, a little bit older, but there's some talk about the Bucks trying to upgrade their team and get involved with some other players. Like maybe they would try to get DeAndre Hunter from the Hawks. And in that case, they would move Bobby Portis. Could you bring in Bobby Portis? I think Bobby Portis has always been like a nice fit on the Grizzlies. He's not going to be one of your starters, but he can give you some solid minutes, in the front court. He's signed into next year, and it's not an expensive salary, making about $12 million, a little over $12 million a year. Like that's a name I could monitor. Like the Mavericks might be selling low on Grant Williams. If they move Grant Williams to a team, is that somebody? I think that's somebody we thought in the offseason would fit well with the Grizzlies. He looked pretty good on the Celtics. He hasn't had that strong of an impact, that positive of an impact on the Mavericks this year, and they might be trying to unload him. So like there's just so many names of guys where I feel like if they get moved, if the Mavericks make a trade for Kyle Kuzma, or if the Kings make a trade for Kyle Kuzma, there's these just various players who are going to be the matching salary in that, where you might want to say, Wizards, you just traded Kuzma for Harrison Barnes. What are your plans for Harrison Barnes? Could we maybe ship him over to our team, and would he help the Grizzlies in a position of need going forward? Those are the things to monitor. Of course, trying to predict or know what's going to happen, basically impossible, because again, there are so many options for the Grizzlies right now, and there are so many options for all these teams. It's basically, there's an infinite number of possibilities of things that could occur. We'll just have to monitor and see what happens. And if you want to follow along with the trade deadline as it occurs, as it unfolds live in real time, you can actually do that with me on Thursday. I'm going to be live on Playback at 1:30 p.m. Central. That'll be 30 minutes before the trade deadline, and then I'll hang out until 30 minutes after the trade deadline, as I will be able to react and talk about whatever deals take place. So you can join over there, playback.tv/fastbreakbreakfast. You don't have to have any kind of subscription to log on and watch. I'll be in there with some of my basketball buddies talking about the trade deadline. So come and join me over there. And that, I think, is everything for today. Who knows what kind of news is going to break today? Maybe the Grizzlies will be involved. And then, of course, tomorrow, always exciting. I love the trade deadline. So come over to Playback and enjoy it with me. Anyways, thanks everybody for listening and watching this show. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you don't do that, please do that. Also, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Come on over there, join the Slack channel, hang out with me and other smart and fun Grizzlies fans there, and get some bonus content. All right, you guys have a great Wednesday. I'll talk to you very soon. Go Grizz.